Hey guys, I hope everyone's having a good day today, and it's about to get much better because we're starting Unit 3 Culture, which is one of my favorite units. And today we're just going to do an introduction focusing on 3.1. One thing that I think you will notice throughout this whole unit is that there's going to be a lot of overlap from Unit 1. So essentially applying those concepts into the context of culture. So that's great. So if you feel like you master that unit, wonderful. If you feel like you need a little bit more context on it, you'll be getting it here. So here's the layout for our presentations for this unit. We're starting with introduction. So one of the themes that will run through the entire unit, and you'll see come up not just in this presentation, but in others, is the idea that cultural practices vary across geographical locations because of physical geography and available resources. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to, hopefully, define the characteristics, attitudes, and traits that influence geographers when they study culture. So we see this in a few different ways. One is through understanding that culture comprises shared practices, technologies, attitudes, behaviors that are transmitted by a society to individuals. We see this in ways that include food preferences, architecture, the way people and places use land, and other ways as well. And also, two centralizing ideas are cultural relativism and ethnocentrism. So these ideas of the way that people perceive and understand other cultures that are not their own. So, what is culture? Make sure that you all are writing this down, keep track of your notes, and feel free to pause or rewatch when you need to. But this definition you absolutely need to know. It's the shared beliefs, values, practices, behaviors, and technologies of a society. So we're going to examine each one of these and look at examples of that. We also have this idea of cultural traits. So these are both the visible and invisible attributes that combine to make up a group's culture. So every culture has a unique mix of cultural traits, and these include artifacts, sociofacts, and mentifacts. So let's take a look at artifacts first. So artifacts, these are the visible physical objects created by a culture. These are things you could see. These are things you can touch. These are apparent to the eye. It can include things like houses, the way people dress, architecture, and the way buildings are designed or spaces are designed, children's toys as well, tools that that group or society might use, furniture, anything that is visible and a physical object. So in this example that we see here, go ahead and take a look at this photo. This is the marble temple located in Thailand. And here we see Buddhist monks presenting alms bowls at this temple. So the bowls themselves, that is an artifact. So take a minute to look at it. What kind of artifacts do you see in this photo? The temple itself is considered an artifact, the building, the structure, as well as the monk's clothing. So the actual physical clothing is part of what would be considered an artifact of a culture. The meaning behind it is something else, right? We'll get to that in just a bit. So these are things you can see, these are physical objects. So, first, sociofacts. These are the ways in which society behaves and organizes institutions. So, think about families and the institution of family, family dynamics, schools and education, the way that a society will structure those. Government and what type of government they have, religion or religions, and what is predominant that we see within that culture, land use, the way that people value or things that people value will be apparent within their land use, and also gender roles, which kind of ties back into family. So, still with this same image, so the religion of Thailand is about 85% Buddhist. So, that would be one of the sociofacts of this culture. In terms of government, there's not an official state religion, even though the vast majority of people claim Buddhism. The king of Thailand must be Buddhist. And we also see that this kind of intersection between government and religion with this coin. This temple is actually pictured on this coin, which tells you a little bit about what that culture values. And in terms of land use, there's hundreds of temples, of Buddhist temples all around Thailand. So again, allocating that land and that space to Buddhist temples tells you what is valuable to them. So that's socio-fact. And then finally, we have Mentifacts, the ideas, beliefs, values, and knowledge of a culture. This includes religious beliefs, language, food preferences, even taboos. So, still using this idea of this temple and Thailand and Buddhism. So, the robes themselves, that is an artifact, but the way that they're designed, what they represent, is a mentifact. So, these particular robes are chosen because they're supposed to be simple, it's supposed to be a detachment from materialism. That idea is a mentifact, whereas the robes themselves is an artifact. So this is rooted in ideas of Buddhism with the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Path. So we see this mentifact of this belief system reflected also in their artifacts. So moving on. We have two types of culture. The first one we're going to talk about is local or traditional culture, sometimes also called folk culture. So, this type of culture is considered small, homogenous groups of people. So, not large in number. Homogenous meaning that they come from the same background, they come from the same place, they have similar characteristics. These are not diverse groups of people. And more often than not, we see them living in rural areas that are isolated, meaning that they don't have that diffusion of outside culture and outside ideas that would lead them to change. So, local traditional cultures tend to stay the same over long periods of time because of that isolation. So, this example here that you see comes from Papua New Guinea, and we see the artifacts that they're wearing in their clothes, the way that they're dressed, even some of their paint on their bodies as well. This has to do with some of their cultural traditions from their area being a local traditional culture. Other elements, cultural traits of local and traditional culture include architecture and land use. So, when we're talking about architecture within the context of local and traditional cultures, we see materials that come from the local physical environment. So, again, like this idea of localization, being more rural or more isolated, they're not importing materials from outside areas. So, they will use what is available to them, which can include snow, mud, stone, bricks, wood, pelts, grass, whatever they can find in that nearby area. In terms of land use, we see that it is often highly agricultural, and it also contributes to their sense of place. So, again, kind of linking back to Unit 1, the unique attributes of a specific location, cultural influences and feelings evoked by people in a place. So, that helps to create that distinctiveness. In this example here, if you look at this image, we see a tall winter house. And so this is located in a more remote region of Canada. And this Inuit tribe, they use what is available to them for their architecture. So we see floors and lower walls made with flagstones, which are available in that area. The roof is held up by whale bones covered with skins, and also slabs of rocks, and the house is also covered with sod. So they are sourcing locally. This Inuit tribe and other Inuit tribes in the Northern Hemisphere, we see using similar materials to structure their homes. So now for global or pop culture or popular culture. This, conversely, is large and heterogeneous. So it includes all kinds of people. It's global culture, right? So it incorporates tons of people with different backgrounds, different age groups, different maybe ethnicities and races and from different countries. So, more times than not, these people are living in urban areas that are interconnected through globalization, through things like the internet, through social media. Pop culture is also very quick to change. So we see trends like coming in and out. And also, this idea of time space compression lends to popular culture. And that's kind of what creates popular culture. So these different cultural elements kind of transcend space and time and spread very quickly. So here, TikTok, I mean, there's all kinds of TikTok trends and memes and all kinds of elements of popular culture that spread very quickly across many places, across many different types of people. So, in terms of architecture and land use, for pop culture or global culture, we see materials from factories that are manufactured, that are then transported. And so, if you look here, right, in both of these examples, here we see some urban sprawl, suburban area. Everything looks very similar, very much the same. Same thing with this mall here. Can't really tell exactly where it is in the world because they use the same kind of materials. So glass, steel, drywall, cement, and so on. For land use, pop culture tends to be urban. Or suburban, places that are highly linked and connected to other areas. And that creates a sense of placelessness. So, this is a loss of uniqueness within the cultural landscape. So, looking at different cultural landscapes, it can be kind of challenging to see where these places actually are because of them being so similar. One place looks like the next. Maybe doesn't really have a strong cultural element to it that is unique. So we see this uniform landscape. So I also have IKEA in here as one example. Especially moving to a new country, right? Everybody goes to IKEA. The furniture is the same, right? The trends are the same. That is one element of popular culture we see kind of across the board. These similar styles. So, for attitudes toward cultural differences, this idea of cultural norms is what people see as normal. And it has to do with their agreed upon cultural practices or standards that guide their behavior within that culture. And that is something that can change over time. That's something that changes over space. So we see different cultural norms within different cultural contexts. Um, Also, along with cultural norms, we also have cultural taboos. So these are behaviors that are very discouraged by a culture. They might not necessarily be outlawed. In some cases, they are, but these are things that are just negatively perceived by that particular culture. So in this example here, you all can pause and read this, but this is just an excerpt that talks about in China, the traditional dog eating. This is something that happens. My dog's over here. Guti, close your ears, don't listen. But for us, right, who see dogs as pets, who did not grow up within that as a cultural norm, this is something that has been happening for at least 400 years within certain provinces of China. So for us, it may be a cultural taboo. For them, it's something that is a norm of their culture. Also, ethnocentrism. So thinking of that root word, right? Centricism or centric and ethno, kind of your within your own culture, your own ethnicity is at the center of your perspective. You can kind of think of it like that. And it's when judging other cultures in terms of your own standards. And that often includes the belief that your own culture or ethnic group is better. And I mean, we see this a lot. Sometimes people just don't have that awareness of other people and places and cultures. So in this example here, we have different levels of veiling for Muslim women. And within each of these, that is their own judgment from their own culture. And in this little cartoon here, we see both of these women, right? Somebody who's obviously from the Western world, whereas a Muslim woman, and they both have the same idea of each other, even though they are dressed completely different. So they're each approaching each other from this lens of ethnocentrism. This goes hand in hand with cultural relativism. So, cultural relativism is the ability to be able to have an unbiased way of viewing another culture. And that is rooted in the goal of trying to promote understanding of other people's cultural practices and things that you might find odd or maybe taboo or just not within your cultural norm is able to be overcome through taking the approach of cultural relativism. So in this little image here, we see somebody offering deep fried crickets, and the person over here is not used to eating them, but again, kind of approaching from cultural relativism, asking the question, can you tell me why you like them, as opposed to just judging that as taboo of like eating bugs or partaking in a particular food preference that is not within your own cultural norm. So, just to recap, make sure that you all can define the characteristics, attitudes, and traits that influence geographers when they study culture. So, including this idea that culture comprises shared practices, technologies, attitudes, behaviors within a particular society. And cultural traits include such things as food preferences, architecture, land use. The ideas of cultural relativism and ethnocentrism are different attitudes toward cultural difference. So go ahead and move on to the next objective. Take a look at your notes and let me know if you'll have any questions in class.